I retired, all I knew was defending my end zone.
I didn't know what to do. I always had my guard up.
Ready to tear someone's head off.
Then I stopped settling for safe-ish and got safe with ADT.
With 24/7 monitoring,
What's up, Brian?
I'm more relaxed than ever.
And I don't have my head on the swivel anymore. Oh, a black cat chickadee.
I had a whole defensive scheme to keep it safe-ish. Woo!
And safe-ish wasn't good enough. Oh, hey.
Hey, Bam Bam!
What's going on?
Because now when it comes to protecting my house, I use ADT. Coming through! No, not in my house!
Oh, a cat.
The apartment had never looked better. I'd spent 3 hours making sure every detail was perfect. Real china plates instead of our usual mismatched set, cloth napkins I'd actually ironed, candles flickering just right on our small dining table. The smell of Sarah's favorite meal, chicken marsala with roasted vegetables, filled the air like a promise of everything good marriages were supposed to be. I checked my watch again. 7:15. She was running late, but that wasn't unusual anymore. Sarah's law firm had been keeping her busy with some big corporate merger, and I understood. I really did. Success took sacrifice, and I was proud of how far she'd come since we'd moved to this mid-sized upstate New York town 3 years ago. The gift sat wrapped in silver paper beside her plate. A small jewelry box containing the earrings she'd admired in that boutique window last month. Nothing extravagant on my engineer's salary, but something that said I paid attention, that I remembered the little things that made her smile. My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. The first message wasn't from Sarah, it was from Jessica Chen, one of her coworkers I'd met at the firm's Christmas party. We'd barely exchanged 10 words that night, but her message was short and apologetic. I'm sorry, but I think you should see this. Everyone at the office knows, and it doesn't feel right keeping you in the dark. The photo that followed hit me like a physical blow. Sarah sat across from Richard Blackwood, her boss, the managing partner, the married man with 2 kids, whose family photos decorated his corner office. They weren't reviewing contracts or discussing legal strategy. Sarah was leaning forward, laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on his arm in a gesture so intimate it made my stomach turn. But it was her face that destroyed me. She looked radiant, alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. When was the last time she'd smiled at me like that? When was the last time she'd dressed up for our dinner dates, the way she was dressed up for him right now? I stared at the photo until the details burned into my memory. The restaurant looked expensive, certainly more expensive than anywhere we'd been lately. Her dress was new, something I'd never seen before. Her hair was styled differently, more carefully. This wasn't some impromptu work dinner. This was planned, deliberate, special. All those late nights at the office suddenly made sense. The new perfume she'd started wearing, the way she'd started showering immediately after coming home instead of collapsing on the couch like she used to, the phone calls she'd take in the other room, speaking in hushed tones about client confidentiality. I set the phone down and looked around our carefully prepared dining room. The candles were still flickering, the food was still warm. The anniversary gift still sat beside her empty plate, waiting for hands that were currently touching another man. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sarah. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm running late at work. I won't make it to dinner." I read the message 3 times. The casual lie, delivered so smoothly, while she sat in that restaurant laughing with her boss, while she chose him over our anniversary, over 3 years of marriage, over the life we'd built together in this small town where everyone knew everyone and secrets had a way of spreading like wildfire. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest. Not heartbreak. Not yet. That would come later. This was something else entirely. This was clarity. I typed back slowly, each word deliberate. "No worries, sweetheart. Say hi to your boss for me." Then I added the part that would let her know the game was over. "I'm leaving the divorce papers on the table. My lawyer will be here when you get home. You don't have a choice anymore. You chose him over our marriage." I hit send and set the phone aside. Of course, I didn't actually have divorce papers ready. I didn't even have a lawyer yet. But Sarah didn't know that, and the message would serve its purpose. It would shatter the comfortable lies she'd been living, the assumption that I was too trusting, too naive, too comfortable to ever figure out what was really going on. I blew out the candles and sat in the growing darkness, waiting for my wife to come home and face the consequences of the choice she'd already made. Sarah's key turned in the lock at 9:30. I heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floor of our entryway, slower than usual, hesitant. She'd seen my message. She knew. "Jake!" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Jake, are you here?" I was sitting at the kitchen table, the dinner I'd prepared now cold and congealed on the plates. The gift box sat unopened beside her place setting, a monument to my own stupidity. She appeared in the doorway, still wearing that new dress from the photo, her makeup slightly smudged. She looked beautiful and guilty and terrified all at once. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" I kept my voice level, conversational. "I thought the photo Jessica sent me pretty much covered everything." The color drained from her face. "Jake, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty self-explanatory. You told me you were working late. You were actually having dinner with your married boss, looking at him like he hung the moon. So please explain that." She moved into the kitchen, her hands twisting together. "It's not what it looks like. It looks like you're having an affair." The words hung in the air between us. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No denial came. "How long?" I asked. "Jake, please." "How long, Sarah?" Her shoulders sagged. 3 months. 3 months, a quarter of a year. All those nights I'd waited up for her, worried about her working too hard, bringing her coffee in the morning and asking about her cases. All those times I'd defended her to my friends when they commented on how much she'd changed since taking the job at Blackwood and Associates. "The earrings you admired last month," I said, nodding toward the gift box. "When we walked past that boutique. You said they were beautiful, but too expensive. Were you thinking about him then?" She started crying. "Jake, I never meant for this to happen. It started as work dinners. And then you decided our marriage wasn't worth preserving. That's not fair." "Fair?" I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been having this conversation before you decided to start screwing your boss. Fair would have been telling me you were unhappy instead of sneaking around behind my back for 3 months. Fair would have been not making me cook anniversary dinner while you were out with another man." She was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks. "I love you, Jake. I do. This thing with Richard, it's complicated." "Richard?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're on a first-name basis. How sweet. He's going through a divorce. His marriage has been over for years." "His marriage has been over for years, but he's still wearing his wedding ring?" I'd noticed it in the photo, the gold band catching the restaurant's lighting. "Or is that just what he tells all the young associates he's sleeping with?" The cruelty in my voice surprised even me. But Sarah flinched like I'd slapped her, and I felt a dark satisfaction at her pain. "You don't understand," she whispered. "The pressure at work, the expectations. Richard believes in me, supports my career. I supported your career. I moved here for your career. I've spent 3 years in this town where I barely know anyone, working at a job that pays half what I made in Albany, all so you could have your shot at making partner. And this is how you repay me?" She reached for me, but I stepped back. "Jake, please. We can work through this. I'll end it with Richard. I'll transfer to another firm if I have to. Just please don't give up on us. You gave up on us 3 months ago." I picked up the gift box and held it out to her. "Here, happy anniversary." She took it with shaking hands, opened it slowly. The earrings caught the kitchen light, small and delicate and meaningless now. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They were supposed to be. Before I knew you were getting your jewelry from someone else." She looked up at me, confused. I nodded toward her ears. "Those aren't the earrings you were wearing this morning?" Her hand flew to her earlobe, touching the small diamond studs I'd never seen before. Expensive ones. The kind a managing partner might buy for his favorite associate. "Jake, get out. This is my home, too. Get out, Sarah. Go to Richard's place. I'm sure his wife won't mind." She stared at me for a long moment, then set the jewelry box on the table and walked toward the door. She paused in the doorway, looking back. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did it anyway. After she left, I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, staring at the cold anniversary dinner and thinking about how quickly a life could change. How 3 years of marriage could be reduced to a photo on a phone and a pair of earrings from another man. I thought about Richard Blackwood, with his corner office and his expensive suits and his promises about divorce that probably weren't worth the breath he'd used to speak them. I thought about Jessica Chen, who'd cared enough about a virtual stranger to send that photo. I thought about all the people at Sarah's firm who'd known about the affair and said nothing. Most of all, I thought about how I was going to make sure everyone in this small town knew exactly what kind of woman Sarah really was and exactly what kind of man Richard Blackwood was. If they wanted to destroy my marriage, I was going to destroy their reputations. The next morning, I called in sick to work and started making phone calls. The first was to Tom Bradley, my only real friend in this town, a former cop turned private investigator who'd helped me navigate the local bureaucracy when we'd first moved here. Jake, hey, Tom's gravelly voice came through the phone. How'd the anniversary dinner go? About as well as the Titanic's maiden voyage. There was a pause. You want to talk about it over coffee? I've got time. We met at Murphy's Diner, a local institution where the coffee was strong and the gossip was stronger. Tom listened without interrupting as I told him everything. The photo, the confrontation, Sarah's admission about the 3-month affair. Richard Blackwood, Tom said when I finished. Yeah, I know him. Handled a couple cases for his firm back when I was still on the force. Real piece of work. Thinks his money makes him untouchable. What do you know about his marriage? Tom stirred his coffee thoughtfully. He's been married to Patricia Blackwood for 15 years. She comes from old money. Her family owns half the commercial real estate downtown. Word is, she's the one with the real power in that relationship. So his story about getting divorced is bullshit. Most likely. Patricia Blackwood doesn't strike me as the type to give up half her assets without a fight, and Richard's too comfortable with her money to actually leave. I felt that cold satisfaction again. What would happen if she found out about the affair? With Sarah or with the others? I nearly choked on my coffee. Others? Tom nodded grimly. Like I said, Blackwood thinks he's untouchable. There have been rumors for years about him and various female employees. Nothing anyone could prove, and the women involved usually ended up transferring to other firms or leaving the legal profession altogether. Jesus, your wife isn't the first young lawyer he's seduced, Jake. She's just the latest. The information hit me like a physical blow. Sarah thought she was special, thought Richard believed in her and supported her career. She had no idea she was just the newest in a long line of conquests. I want to destroy him, I said quietly. Tom studied my face. That's a dangerous road, Jake. You sure you want to go down it? He destroyed my marriage. Seems only fair. Fair's got nothing to do with it. You start playing games with people like Richard Blackwood, you better be prepared for them to play back. And they play dirty. I thought about Sarah's tears the night before, about the earrings from another man, about 3 months of lies and deception. Then I'll play dirtier. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. I've got a contact at the private investigator firm that handles divorce cases for the wealthy wives in this town. A woman named Lisa Martinez. She's very good at documenting indiscretions. You think she'd work for me? I think she'd work for Patricia Blackwood if the right information happened to reach Mrs. Blackwood's attention. I understood. Tom was offering me a way to expose Richard's affair without getting my hands dirty directly. Let Patricia Blackwood hire the investigator. Let her discover her husband's infidelity through official channels. Let her be the one to bring Richard's world crashing down. What about Sarah? What about her? She's going to get caught in the crossfire. Tom shrugged. She made her choice, Jake. Actions have consequences. He was right. Sarah had chosen Richard over our marriage. She'd chosen to lie to me for 3 months, to sneak around behind my back, to wear another man's jewelry while sitting at our kitchen table. Whatever happened to her career was a consequence of her own decisions. And how do we make sure Patricia Blackwood gets the right information? Tom smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Leave that to me. We spent the next hour planning. Tom would reach out to his contact, who would approach Patricia Blackwood with concerns about her husband's fidelity. The investigator would begin surveillance, document the affair, and provide Patricia with all the evidence she needed for a divorce that would leave Richard with nothing. Meanwhile, I would play the role of the devastated husband, the innocent victim who just wanted to move on with his life. I would file for divorce, cite irreconcilable differences, and let everyone assume I was too heartbroken and humiliated to fight back. They would never see the real attack coming until it was too late. "One more thing," Tom said as we prepared to leave. "You might want to think about what you're going to do after this is over. Small towns have long memories. People are going to take sides. Let them. I'm not planning to stay here much longer anyway." That was true. Without Sarah, there was nothing keeping me in this place. I could transfer back to Albany, maybe even get my old job back. Start over somewhere that didn't have memories of my failed marriage on every street corner. But first, I was going to make sure Richard Blackwood and my cheating wife got exactly what they deserved. Within a week, the plan was in motion. Tom's contact had approached Patricia Blackwood, and the private investigator was already documenting Richard's movements. Sarah had moved into a furnished apartment downtown, close to the law firm, and was trying to maintain the pretense that our separation was amicable. I was at the grocery store buying ingredients for meals for one, when I ran into David and Michelle Carter. They'd been our closest couple friends since we'd moved to town. Dinner parties, game nights, weekend barbecues. David worked in insurance, Michelle taught high school English, and they'd always seemed like the kind of solid, dependable people you could count on in a crisis. "Jake!" Michelle's voice was bright but strained. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing." I kept my voice neutral, playing the part of the wounded husband, trying to maintain his dignity. David shifted uncomfortably. "We heard about you and Sarah. We're really sorry, man. These things happen." "Actually," Michelle said, glancing at her husband, "we were hoping we could talk to you about something." I waited. "Sarah called us yesterday," David said. "She's really torn up about everything. She says there are things about the situation that you're not understanding. That maybe if you had some mutual friends to help mediate." "Mediate what exactly?" Michelle jumped in. "She says you're not willing to work on the marriage. That you've already made up your mind about divorce without even trying counseling or... Did she tell you about Richard Blackwood?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "She did," I said. "And you're here anyway, trying to convince me to take back my cheating wife." "It's complicated, Jake," Michelle said softly. "Marriage always is. Sometimes people make mistakes." "Mistakes?" I laughed, loud enough that other shoppers turned to look. "She had a 3-month affair with her married boss. She lied to me every day for a quarter of a year. She wore his jewelry to our anniversary dinner and then ditched me to be with him. That's not a mistake, Michelle. That's a choice." David stepped forward. "Look, man, we get that you're hurt. Do you? Because it sounds like you're more concerned about Sarah's feelings than mine." "She's our friend, too," Michelle said defensively. "And I'm not?" Another uncomfortable silence. "We've known Sarah longer," David said finally. "Before you guys moved here. She helped Michelle get the job at the high school. Introduced us to half the people we know in town. She's been a good friend to us." The truth hit me like a slap. They weren't here because they cared about my marriage or wanted to help us reconcile. They were here because Sarah had gotten to them first, told them her version of events, and convinced them that I was the unreasonable one. "What exactly did she tell you?" I asked. Michelle and David exchanged glances. "She said you'd been growing apart for months," Michelle said carefully, "that you resented her success at the firm, that you'd been cold and distant. She said the thing with Richard happened because she was lonely and feeling unsupported at home. And you believed her." "We've seen how you've been lately, Jake," David said. "At the barbecue last month, at game night, you seemed, I don't know, checked out. Like you didn't want to be there." I thought back to those social gatherings. I had been quiet, distracted, but not because I resented Sarah's success or felt unsupported. I'd been worried about her, about the long hours and the stress, and the way she seemed to be pulling away from me. I'd been trying to figure out how to help her, how to reconnect with the woman I'd married. Instead, she'd been using my concern as evidence of my failure as a husband. "So you think I drove her into another man's arms?" "We think marriages are complicated," Michelle said. "And we think you're both good people who made some bad choices." "I made bad choices?" "You're not entirely innocent here, Jake," David said, his voice hardening. "Sarah says you've been controlling about her career, jealous of her success. I moved here for her career. I took a pay cut and left my friends and my life in Albany so she could have her shot at making partner. How is that controlling? Maybe that's the problem, Michelle said. Maybe she feels guilty about the sacrifices you made, and that guilt is driving some of this behavior. I stared at them both, these people I'd considered friends, and realized how completely Sarah had manipulated the narrative. In their minds, I was the neglectful husband who'd driven his wife to seek comfort elsewhere. Sarah was the victim of a loveless marriage and a demanding career, just trying to find happiness wherever she could. You know what? I said, putting my groceries back in the cart. You're right. Marriage is complicated, but adultery isn't. She cheated. She lied. She chose someone else. And if you can't see that, then maybe we were never really friends to begin with. I started to walk away, but David called after me. Jake, come on. Don't let pride destroy your marriage. I turned back. My marriage was destroyed 3 months ago when my wife started sleeping with her boss. I'm just the last one to find out about it. As I walked toward the checkout, I heard Michelle say to her husband, Sarah was right. He's not willing to take any responsibility for his part in this. By the time I got home, I was angrier than I'd been since the night I'd discovered the affair. Not just at Sarah, but at the friends who'd chosen her side without even hearing mine. At the way she'd managed to paint herself as the victim and me as the villain in the story of our marriage's destruction. I called Tom. They're not just having an affair, I told him. She's running a PR campaign. What do you mean? I told him about the encounter with David and Michelle, about Sarah's version of events, about how she'd managed to convince our mutual friends that I was the one at fault. Smart woman, Tom said. She's getting ahead of the story, controlling the narrative before you have a chance to tell your side. What do I do about it? Nothing for now. Let her think she's winning the public relations battle. Meanwhile, we focus on the real war, which is destroying Richard Blackwood. Once his world comes crashing down, Sarah's going to find out exactly how much her career advancement was worth, and your mutual friends are going to realize they backed the wrong horse. Tom was right. I needed to stay focused on the bigger picture. Sarah could have David and Michelle and whoever else she'd convinced to take her side. When Patricia Blackwood finished with her husband, Sarah would discover that sleeping with the boss only worked as long as the boss had power to share, and Richard Blackwood's days of power were numbered. 2 weeks later, Tom called with an update. Patricia Blackwood hired the investigator. They've been following Richard for a week now. What did they find? Exactly what we expected. He's not just seeing your wife. There's at least one other woman, maybe two. The man's running a regular rotation. I felt sick. Not because I still cared about Sarah's feelings, but because I realized how completely she'd been played. She thought she was special. Thought Richard was going to leave his wife for her. She had no idea she was just one of several women he was stringing along. There's more, Tom continued. The investigator did some digging into Richard's finances. Turns out he's been using firm money to pay for his extracurricular activities. Expensive dinners, jewelry, weekend trips, all of it billed to client entertainment or business development. That's embezzlement. That's a felony. Patricia's divorce attorney is very interested in those financial records. I thought about the earrings Sarah had been wearing, the ones Richard had bought her, paid for with money stolen from his own law firm. When does Patricia confront him? Soon. She wants to have all her ducks in a row first. Once she files for divorce, she's going for everything. The house, the cars, his stake in the law firm, even his pension. Richard Blackwood is going to be lucky if he can afford a studio apartment when she's done with him. And Sarah. What about her? When Richard's world implodes, she's going to be collateral damage. That's what happens when you sleep with other people's husbands, Jake. Actions have consequences. Tom was right, but I still felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy for the woman I'd once loved. Sarah had made terrible choices, but she'd also been manipulated by a man who was clearly a predator. Richard Blackwood had used his position of power to seduce her, made her promises he had no intention of keeping, and now she was going to pay the price for trusting him. Then I remembered the 3 months of lies, the anniversary dinner she'd skipped, the way she'd tried to make our mutual friends believe I was the villain in our story. The sympathy faded. There's something else you should know, Tom said. Word's getting around town about the separation. People are talking. What kind of talking? The kind you'd expect in a small town. Some people are on your side, some are on hers. But there's a third group that's just enjoying the drama. I'd expected that. In a town this size, a scandalous divorce was entertainment. People would pick sides, spread rumors, and generally make the whole situation worse for everyone involved. Anyone I should be worried about? Maybe. Sarah's been spending time with the Hendersons, that couple with the big house on Elm Street. Rich, connected, think they run the social scene around here. Word is they're not happy about the scandal affecting their friend Richard. I knew the Hendersons by reputation. Robert Henderson owned several local businesses, and his wife Carolyn sat on every charity board and social committee in town. They were the kind of people who cared more about appearances than truth, who would close ranks around their wealthy friends regardless of what those friends had done. What kind of not happy? The kind where they might try to make life difficult for you, pressure your employer, spread rumors, that sort of thing. Let them try. But even as I said it, I realized the situation was more complicated than I'd initially thought. This wasn't just about exposing Richard's affair and getting revenge on Sarah. This was about a whole network of wealthy, connected people who had a vested interest in protecting one of their own. If I wanted to win this war, I was going to need more ammunition. Tom, I need you to dig deeper into Richard's background. Not just the current affairs, but everything. His history with female employees, his financial dealings, anything that might be useful. That's going to cost money. How much? More than you probably want to spend. I thought about my savings account, about the money I'd been setting aside for a down payment on a house Sarah and I had planned to buy. That dream was dead now. Might as well use the money to bury the man who'd killed it. Do it. Jake, are you sure about this? Once we start digging this deep, there's no going back. And if Richard figures out what we're doing, he won't. He's too arrogant to think anyone would dare challenge him. That was Richard Blackwood's weakness, I realized. He'd been getting away with his behavior for so long that he'd become careless, overconfident. He thought his money and position made him untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise. The confrontation I'd been expecting came on a Thursday evening. I was grilling dinner on my back patio when David and Michelle Carter showed up at my door, along with two other couples from our former social circle, the Johnsons and the Millers. "We need to talk," David said without preamble. I turned off the grill and gestured toward the patio furniture. "Have a seat." They arranged themselves in a semicircle, like some kind of intervention. Michelle looked uncomfortable, but David's expression was hard. "This has gone far enough, Jake," he said. "The whole town's talking about you and Sarah, and it's getting ugly. What's getting ugly is my wife's affair with her married boss. But I'm not the one who made that choice." "You're being vindictive," said Karen Johnson, a sharp-faced woman who'd never liked me much anyway. "Sarah made a mistake, but you're trying to destroy her life. I'm trying to get divorced. Sarah's the one who destroyed her own life. By filing for divorce, you're forcing her to choose between her marriage and her career," Michelle said. "That's not fair." I stared at her. She already chose her career over her marriage. 3 months ago, when she started sleeping with Richard Blackwood. "You don't understand the pressure she's under," said Linda Miller, jumping to Sarah's defense. "Richard's been mentoring her, helping her advance. If she loses his support now, she'll have to succeed on her own merit instead of on her back." The words were cruel, and I saw Michelle flinch. But I was tired of these people treating Sarah like a victim, and me like the villain. "That's enough," David said, standing up. "We came here to try to reason with you, but clearly you're too bitter to listen." "Reason with me about what? Taking back my cheating wife?" "About not destroying an innocent man's reputation with rumors and gossip," Karen Johnson said. I went very still. "What did you just say?" "Richard Blackwood is a pillar of this community," she continued. "He's donated thousands of dollars to local charities, created jobs, supported local businesses, and you're trying to destroy him with malicious rumors about some supposed affair that probably never even happened." "Supposed affair?" "Sarah says you've been paranoid and jealous for months," David said. "That you've been following her, checking her phone, making accusations. She thinks you hired someone to take that photo, to make it look like something it wasn't." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She told you the photo was fake?" "She told us you've been harassing her and Richard, trying to manufacture evidence of an affair that exists only in your imagination, Michelle said softly. Jake, we think you need help. Professional help. The audacity of it took my breath away. Sarah hadn't just convinced our friends that I was partly to blame for our marriage problems. She'd convinced them that I was mentally unstable, that I'd fabricated the entire affair out of jealousy and paranoia. You think I'm crazy? We think you're hurting, Linda Miller said gently, and we think that hurt is making you see things that aren't there. I looked around at their faces, some sympathetic, some judgmental, all of them convinced that I was the problem. Sarah had played them perfectly, turning my legitimate anger about her infidelity into evidence of my mental instability. Get out, I said quietly. Jake, Michelle started. Get out of my house, all of you. We're trying to help, David said. You're trying to gaslight me into believing my wife didn't cheat on me. That's not help. That's psychological abuse. No one's trying to abuse you, Karen Johnson said. We're trying to get you to see reason before you do something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is considering any of you friends. They left, but not before David turned back at the door. Sarah's a good woman, Jake. If you can't see that, then maybe she's better off without you. After they were gone, I sat on my patio and tried to process what had just happened. Sarah hadn't just cheated on me. She'd systematically destroyed my reputation, convinced our mutual friends that I was unstable and vindictive, and positioned herself as the victim of my supposed delusions. It was brilliant in a sociopathic way. By denying the affair entirely, she'd forced me into the position of having to prove something that everyone already knew was true. And in a small town where Richard Blackwood was respected and I was just the outsider who'd moved here for his wife's career, people were inclined to believe her version of events. I called Tom. They think I'm crazy, I told him. Who thinks you're crazy? I explained about the intervention, about Sarah's claim that the photo was fake, about how she'd convinced everyone that I was manufacturing evidence out of jealousy. Jesus, Tom said when I finished. She's good, I'll give her that. What do I do now? We accelerate the timeline. Patricia Blackwood was planning to wait another week before confronting Richard, but I think we need to push her to move faster. Why? Because Sarah's building a narrative where you're the unstable ex-husband making false accusations against an innocent man. If that story gets too entrenched, it's going to be harder to dislodge, even after the truth comes out. Tom was right. The longer this went on, the more time Sarah had to solidify her version of events. I needed the truth to come out now, before she could do any more damage to my reputation. How do we make Patricia move faster? We give her something she can't ignore, something that proves Richard's not just cheating, but stealing from the firm to pay for it. The financial records? I'm thinking bigger than that. What if Patricia caught Richard and Sarah together? In person, undeniably, with witnesses. I understood what Tom was suggesting. Instead of waiting for the private investigator to gather more evidence, we would create a situation where Patricia Blackwood would discover her husband's affair herself, in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. How? Leave that to me. But Jake? After this happens, there's no going back. Richard's gonna know someone set him up, and he's gonna come after you hard. Let him come. I was done playing defense. Sarah wanted to paint me as the villain in this story? Fine, I'd show her what a real villain looked like. Tom's plan was elegant in its simplicity. The Blackwood and Associates annual charity gala was scheduled for the following Saturday, a black tie event at the town's fanciest hotel, with all the local elite in attendance. Richard would be there with his wife, playing the role of the devoted husband and pillar of the community. Sarah would be there too, as one of the firm's rising stars. What Richard didn't know was that Patricia had hired additional security for the event. Security that included Tom's private investigator friend, who would be monitoring the hotel's security cameras and looking for any opportunity to document Richard's indiscretions. He won't be able to resist, Tom explained as we went over the plan. Put Richard in a room with Sarah and an open bar, with his wife distracted by her social obligations, and he'll make a move. They always do. What if he doesn't? Then we have a backup plan. The investigator has been tracking Richard's patterns. He usually takes Sarah to the Riverside Inn on Friday nights. It's out of town, discreet, the kind of place where married men take their mistresses. You want Patricia to catch them there? I want Patricia to follow them there. Let her see for herself what her husband does on his business trips. The plan had risks. If Richard suspected he was being watched, he might be more careful. If Sarah sensed something was wrong, she might warn him. But it was better than waiting for the slow accumulation of evidence while Sarah continued to destroy my reputation. Friday came, and I found myself parked outside the Riverside Inn at 7 p.m., waiting. Tom was in his own car across the parking lot, and somewhere nearby, Patricia Blackwood was getting ready to discover what kind of man she'd been married to for 15 years. At 7:30, Richard's BMW pulled into the lot. Sarah was in the passenger seat, laughing at something he'd said. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before. Another gift from her generous lover, no doubt. They went inside, and I waited. 20 minutes later, Patricia's Mercedes arrived. She sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the hotel entrance, steeling herself for what she was about to see. When she finally went inside, I followed at a distance. The Riverside Inn was the kind of place that catered to discretion, dimly lit, with private booths and a bar that didn't ask questions. Richard and Sarah were in a corner booth, sitting on the same side, his hand on her thigh as they shared a bottle of wine. Patricia saw them immediately. I watched from across the room as Patricia Blackwood's carefully composed facade cracked. She stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, watching her husband caress another woman, seeing the intimacy that couldn't be explained away as a business dinner or professional mentoring. Then, she walked over to their table. "Hello, Richard." Richard's head snapped up, his face going white. Sarah looked confused for a moment, then horrified as she realized who was standing there. "Patricia," Richard stammered, pulling his hand away from Sarah's leg. "What are you doing here? I could ask you the same question." Patricia's voice was ice-cold, controlled. "But I think the answer is obvious." Sarah started to stand up. "Mrs. Blackwood, I can explain—" "Can you? Please, I'd love to hear how you explain fucking my husband." The words cut through the restaurant's quiet murmur like a knife. Other diners turned to stare, and I saw the hotel manager moving toward the table. "Patricia, please," Richard said, glancing around nervously. "Not here. Not in public." "Not in public?" Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You didn't seem concerned about public when you were groping your employee in a restaurant where anyone could see you." "It's not what it looks like." "It looks like adultery, Richard. It looks like you throwing away 15 years of marriage for some cheap office slut." Sarah's face flushed red. "I'm not—" "You're not what? Not sleeping with a married man? Not destroying a family for your own career advancement? Not pathetic enough to think he actually cares about you?" The cruelty in Patricia's voice was surgical, precise. She wasn't just angry. She was destroying them both with the skill of someone who'd spent years in high society, who knew exactly how to cut deepest. "He's leaving you," Sarah said, her voice shaking. He told you what you wanted to hear, you stupid girl. Do you think you're the first? Do you think you're special?" Sarah looked at Richard, waiting for him to defend her, to confirm his promises about divorce and a future together. But Richard was staring at his hands, saying nothing. "How many others have there been, Richard?" Patricia continued. "How many young lawyers have you seduced, with promises of partnership and love? How much of my money have you spent on your whores?" "Patricia, stop," Richard said quietly. "We can discuss this at home. We can discuss it right here, in front of your latest conquest. I want her to understand exactly what kind of man she's been sleeping with." Patricia turned back to Sarah. "He's not leaving me, dear. He's not getting divorced. He's not going to marry you or make you a partner or any of the other things he's promised. Do you know why?" Sarah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Because he can't afford to leave me. Everything he has, the house, the cars, his stake in the law firm, it's all mine. My family's money built that firm, and if Richard tries to divorce me, he'll lose everything." She leaned closer to Sarah, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the restaurant. "You're not his future, sweetheart. You're his entertainment. And now that I know about you, you're not even that anymore." Patricia straightened up and looked at her husband. "I'll see you at home, Richard. We have a lot to discuss." She walked out of the restaurant with her head high, leaving Richard and Sarah sitting in stunned silence while the entire dining room stared at them. I left before they recovered enough to notice me, but I'd seen enough. The trap had worked perfectly. Richard Blackwood's reputation was about to become the hottest gossip in town, and Sarah was about to learn that sleeping with the boss only worked as long as the boss had power to protect you. By Monday morning, everyone in town would know the truth about their affair, and everyone who'd believed Sarah's story about my supposed paranoia and delusions would have to face the fact that they'd been played by a master manipulator. The war wasn't over, but I just won the most important battle. By Monday morning, the story of Patricia Blackwood's public confrontation at the Riverside Inn had spread through town like wildfire. The local coffee shops, barber shops, and grocery stores were buzzing with details that grew more dramatic with each retelling. I was at Murphy's Diner, enjoying my coffee and the vindication of being proven right, when Michelle Carter appeared at my table. She looked embarrassed and uncertain, nothing like the confident woman who'd tried to convince me I was imagining my wife's affair. "Jake, can I sit down?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "We all do." "Do you?" She flinched at the coldness in my voice. "We heard about what happened Friday night, about Patricia catching Richard and Sarah together." "You mean you heard that my wife's affair actually exists? That I wasn't just a paranoid, jealous husband making up stories?" "Sarah lied to us. She told us you were unstable, that you were harassing her and Richard, that the photo was somehow fake or taken out of context. And you believed her. She was convincing, and we'd known her longer, trusted her more." Michelle's voice was small, ashamed. "We thought we were helping." "You thought you were protecting your friend's reputation at my expense." "Yes, and we were wrong." I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus social obligation. Michelle had always been the more empathetic of the Carter couple, the one more likely to feel guilty about hurting someone. "What do you want from me, Michelle?" "Forgiveness, I guess, and maybe we could try to rebuild our friendship." "Why would I want to do that?" The question seemed to surprise her. "Because we made a mistake. Because we're sorry." "You made a choice," I corrected. "When you had to decide between believing me or believing Sarah, you chose Sarah. When you had to decide between supporting the victim of infidelity or the person who committed it, you chose the cheater. That wasn't a mistake, Michelle. That was a revelation of your character." She was quiet for a long moment. "David says I shouldn't have come here. He says you're too bitter to forgive anyone." "David's probably right. But it's not bitterness that's keeping me from welcoming you back with open arms. It's the knowledge that the next time you have to choose between doing what's right and doing what's convenient for your social circle, you'll choose convenience again." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been giving me the benefit of the doubt when I told you my wife was cheating. Fair would have been asking Sarah for proof when she claimed I was delusional. Fair would have been staying neutral until you knew all the facts." Michelle's eyes filled with tears. "We were trying to save your marriage." "No, you were trying to avoid having to pick sides in a messy situation. And when Sarah made it easy for you by painting me as the villain, you jumped at the chance to make me the problem instead of dealing with the reality that your friend was a cheater and a liar." I stood up, leaving money on the table for my coffee. "Jake, please tell David and the rest of your friends that I appreciate the apology. But I'm not interested in rebuilding relationships with people who showed me exactly who they are when it mattered." I left Michelle sitting alone at the table, crying into her coffee. I felt a moment of sympathy for her. She genuinely seemed to regret her choices, but not enough to forgive her. She and David and the others had made their decision when they chose to believe Sarah's lies over my truth. Now they could live with the consequences. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. It was Tom. "You see the news this morning? About Patricia's confrontation?" "Yeah, I was there." "Not that. Richard Blackwood's been suspended from the law firm pending an internal investigation." I stopped walking. "What kind of investigation?" "The kind where the managing partners suddenly realize they might be liable for their employees' sexual harassment of subordinates. Word is, they're looking into all of Richard's relationships with female employees, not just Sarah." "Sexual harassment?" Think about it, Jake. Richard's in a position of power over Sarah and the other women he's been involved with. He controls their assignments, their evaluations, their chances for advancement. Any sexual relationship between them is inherently coercive. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but Tom was right. Sarah might have believed she was making free choices, but those choices were being made under the implicit threat that rejecting Richard's advances could damage her career. What does this mean for Sarah? Probably nothing good. She's been the most visible of Richard's conquests. And now that the firm's trying to distance itself from him, she's going to be seen as a liability. They'll fire her. They'll probably encourage her to resign. Less messy than termination, better for everyone's reputation. I thought about Sarah's ambitions, her dreams of making partner, the sacrifices she'd made to build her legal career. She'd thrown away her marriage for a man who'd promised to advance her professionally. And now she was about to lose both her husband and her career. There's something else, Tom continued. Patricia's divorce attorney filed papers this morning. She's going for everything. The house, the cars, Richard's stake in the firm, even his pension. And she's claiming adultery as grounds, which means Richard's going to be lucky to keep his law license, much less his assets. Good. Jake, there's one more thing you should know. Sarah's been trying to reach you. I know, I've been ignoring her calls. Maybe you shouldn't. Word is, she's pretty desperate right now. Her world's falling apart, and you might be the only person who can help her. I thought about that. Sarah had lied to me, cheated on me, tried to destroy my reputation with our mutual friends. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences, but she was also the woman I'd loved for 3 years, the woman I'd moved across the state for, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with. Did I owe her anything now that her carefully constructed lies were collapsing around her? What do you think I should do? That's up to you, Jake. But remember, whatever you decide, you're going to have to live with it. And so is she. I stood in the parking lot outside Murphy's Diner, thinking about Sarah sitting in her furnished apartment, watching her career and her reputation crumble, realizing that the man she'd destroyed her marriage for was never going to save her. Part of me felt satisfied. She'd gotten exactly what she deserved. But another part of me, the part that had loved her enough to iron napkins for our anniversary dinner, wondered if revenge was worth the cost of becoming the kind of person who could watch someone suffer without feeling anything at all. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment, then made my choice. I answered the call. Jake? Sarah's voice was small, broken. Thank you for answering. What do you want, Sarah? I need to see you. Please. There are things I need to explain. Things you don't understand about what happened. I almost laughed. Even now, with her world crashing down around her, she was still trying to control the narrative. I understand everything I need to understand. No, you don't. Richard told me he was getting divorced. He said his marriage was over, that he just needed time to handle things properly. I never would have. I'm not the kind of person who breaks up marriages. But you are the kind of person who lies to her husband for 3 months. Silence on the other end of the line. I made mistakes, she said finally. Terrible mistakes. But I never meant to hurt you. You just meant to replace me. That's not... She stopped, seeming to realize that denying it would only make things worse. I was confused. Richard made me feel important, valued, like I could be something more than just another associate at the firm. And I made you feel like what? Like I was settling. The honesty of it hit me like a physical blow. After everything, the lies, the manipulation, the attempts to destroy my reputation, this was the truth. I hadn't been enough for her. Our marriage hadn't been enough. The life we'd built together had felt like settling for less than she deserved. I see. Jake, I didn't mean it like that. I love you. I've always loved you. But Richard offered me a different kind of life, a different kind of future, a future that never existed. He was never going to leave his wife, Sarah. You were just another conquest in a long line of women he's seduced and discarded. I know that now. Do you? Because 2 weeks ago you were telling our friends that I was delusional, that I'd made up the whole affair out of jealousy and paranoia. Another long silence. I was scared, she said finally. Richard told me you were trying to destroy both of us, that you'd hired private investigators and were spreading rumors. He said the only way to protect ourselves was to discredit you first. So you convinced everyone I was mentally unstable. I convinced them you were hurting and not thinking clearly. I thought if I could just buy us some time, Richard would handle his divorce, and we could figure out how to make this work. Make what work? Your affair? Make our transition to being apart less painful for everyone. I had to admire the euphemism. Even now, she couldn't bring herself to call it what it was. The destruction of our marriage for a fantasy that had never been real. Where are you now, Sarah? At my apartment. Jake, they fired me today. I heard you were encouraged to resign. Same thing. Richard's been suspended, and the firm doesn't want any association with the scandal. My career's over. There was genuine despair in her voice now, the sound of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Really? I considered the question. Was I sorry that Sarah had lost her job, her reputation, her future in law? Or was I satisfied that she was finally facing the consequences of her choices? I'm sorry that you threw away everything good in your life for something that was never real, I said finally. I'm sorry that you destroyed our marriage for a man who never cared about you. I'm sorry that you're learning the hard way that actions have consequences. But you're not sorry I'm suffering. No, I'm not. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. I deserve this. Yes, you do. Jake, I know I have no right to ask, but is there any chance we could try to work this out? I know I hurt you, betrayed you, lied to you. But maybe we could go to counseling, try to rebuild what we had. What we had was based on trust. You destroyed that. Trust can be rebuilt. Can it? Because even now, even after everything that's happened, you're still lying to me. What do you mean? You said Richard told you he was getting divorced, that his marriage was over, but you knew that wasn't true. I didn't. You knew Patricia Blackwood, Sarah. You'd met her at firm events, social gatherings. You knew she was wealthy, connected, that she had power in this town. Did you really believe Richard was going to give all that up for you? Silence. You knew he was lying, I continued, but you chose to believe the lie because it made it easier to justify what you were doing. Just like you chose to lie to our friends about my mental state because it made it easier to avoid taking responsibility for your choices. You're right. Her voice was flat, defeated. You're right about all of it. I know. So there's no chance? No possibility that we could find a way back to each other? I thought about the woman I'd married, the woman who'd smiled at me across candlelit restaurant tables, who'd laughed at my jokes and shared my dreams of building a life together. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who could lie with ease, manipulate mutual friends, and destroy a marriage for the promise of career advancement. No, Sarah, there's no way back. She started crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that spoke of genuine grief and regret. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But that part was smaller now, overwhelmed by the knowledge of what she'd done and who she'd revealed herself to be. I'm going to leave town, she said when the crying subsided. Start over somewhere else. Try to rebuild my life. That's probably for the best. Jake? Yeah? For what it's worth, I really did love you. I still do. I know. But love wasn't enough to keep you from betraying me. And it's not enough to make me forgive you. After she hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about the conversation and what it meant. Sarah was finally facing the full consequences of her choices. The loss of her marriage, her career, her reputation, her future in this town. She was alone, unemployed, and starting over from nothing. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated, and part of me did. But another part of me just felt empty, like I'd won a war that had cost me everything I'd once cared about. My phone rang. It was Tom. How'd it go? About like you'd expect. She wanted to reconcile. And I told her no. Good. You made the right choice, Jake. Did I? Because right now it doesn't feel like winning. That's because you're not a sociopath. Normal people don't feel good about destroying someone they once loved, even when that person deserves it. Tom was right, but it didn't make the hollowness in my chest any easier to bear. There's news, Tom continued. Richard Blackwood's been arrested. For what? Embezzlement. Turns out he's been stealing from client accounts for years, not just using firm money for his affairs. The FBI got involved when Patricia's divorce attorney turned over the financial records. How much? Close to $500,000. He's looking at serious federal time. I thought about Richard Blackwood, the man who'd seemed so powerful and untouchable just a week ago. Now he was facing prison, bankruptcy, and the complete destruction of everything he'd built. What about Patricia? She's fine. Better than fine, actually. Turns out she's been planning this for a while, building her own case against Richard. The affair with Sarah just gave her the final piece she needed. She used us. She used the situation to her advantage. Can't say I blame her. I couldn't either. Patricia Blackwood had played the game better than any of us, using our drama to achieve her own goals. She'd gotten rid of her cheating husband, protected her assets, and probably earned the sympathy of their social circle in the process. So what now? I asked. Now you move on with your life. You've got your vindication, your revenge, and your freedom. What more do you want? What more did I want? I'd wanted Sarah to pay for her betrayal, and she had. I'd wanted Richard to face consequences for his actions, and he was. I'd wanted the truth to come out, and it had. But sitting in that parking lot, talking to Tom about the wreckage of multiple lives, I realized that revenge was a cold comfort. It didn't bring back the marriage I'd lost or the trust that had been broken. It didn't make me feel whole again. It just made me feel like I'd become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could orchestrate the destruction of other people's lives and call it justice. I think I'm done with this town, I said finally. Probably a good idea. Fresh start, clean slate. Yeah, fresh start. But as I drove home to my empty house, I wondered if it was possible to start fresh when you'd learned things about yourself that couldn't be unlearned. When you discover that under the right circumstances, with enough provocation, you could become someone capable of methodical, devastating revenge. Sarah had betrayed me, but in seeking my revenge, I'd betrayed something in myself. And unlike her betrayal, mine was something I'd have to live with forever. The war was over. I'd won, but victory tasted like ashes in my mouth. I was packing the last of my belongings when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Michelle Carter standing on my front porch, holding what looked like a casserole dish. I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. Hi, Jake. She looked nervous, uncertain. I heard you were moving. News travels fast in small towns. I brought you something, a going-away gift, I guess. She held out the casserole dish. Tuna noodle casserole. I remember you saying you liked it. I took the dish, surprised that she'd remembered such a small detail from a dinner party we'd hosted 2 years ago. Thank you. How are you doing? Really? I thought about the question. How was I doing? I had a new job lined up in Denver, a fresh start in a city where nobody knew my story. I'd lost 20 pounds, started running again, even gone on a few dates. By most measures, I was doing well. I'm okay, I said finally. I'm glad. I worried about you after everything. Did you? She nodded. I know you don't think much of me anymore, and I understand why. But I did care about you, Jake. I still do. I appreciate that. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Have you heard from Sarah? She asked finally. No, have you? She called me last month. She's in Portland now, working as a paralegal for a small firm. She says she's doing okay, but Michelle shrugged. She sounds different, sadder. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but it was distant, muted. Sarah's sadness wasn't my responsibility anymore. What about Richard? He pled guilty last week. 5 years in federal prison, full restitution to the clients he stole from. Patricia got everything in the divorce. And Patricia, Michelle smiled slightly. She's doing very well. Started her own consulting firm, sits on half the boards in town. Some people say she's the most powerful person in the city now. Good for her. Another silence. Jake, I know it doesn't mean much now, but I want you to know that I learned something from all this. About loyalty, about friendship, about not just believing what's convenient to believe. What did you learn? That it's better to be wrong about someone you trust than right about someone you don't. It was a good lesson, though it had come too late to save our friendship. I hope things work out for you in Denver, she said. Thanks. I hope things work out for you here. After she left, I finished packing and loaded the last boxes into my truck. As I drove through town one final time, I passed all the places that had been part of my story. Murphy's Diner, where I'd planned my revenge. The Riverside Inn, where Patricia had confronted Richard and Sarah. The law offices where Sarah had worked and dreamed of partnership. It all looked smaller now, less significant. Just buildings in a town I'd never really belonged to, filled with people whose opinions had mattered too much to me for too long. My phone buzzed as I reached the city limits. A text from an unknown number. Jake, it's Sarah. Michelle told me you were leaving town today. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find happiness in Denver. You deserve it. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Sarah's apologies, like her love, had come too late to matter. As I drove west toward my new life, I thought about the man I'd been when I'd first moved to that town. Trusting, optimistic, believing in the power of love and commitment to overcome any obstacle. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder, more cynical, less willing to give others the benefit of the doubt. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it was just a necessary thing, the price of learning that the world was more complicated and cruel than I'd wanted to believe. The sun was setting behind me as I crossed into Colorado, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere ahead was Denver, a new job, a new apartment, a new chance to build a life that didn't include memories of betrayal and revenge. I'd won my war against Sarah and Richard Blackwood. I'd proven that actions had consequences, that lies eventually came to light, that justice, however delayed, eventually prevailed. But as I drove toward my uncertain future, I couldn't shake the feeling that my victory had cost me something essential, something I might never get back. The capacity to trust completely, the ability to love without reservation, the belief that most people were fundamentally good. Sarah had taken those things from me when she chose Richard over our marriage. And in my quest for revenge, I'd finished the job she'd started. I was free now, vindicated and victorious. But I was also alone in ways I'd never been before, carrying scars that would shape every relationship I'd ever have. The road stretched out ahead of me, empty and full of possibility. Behind me lay the wreckage of everything I'd once believed about love and loyalty and the power of commitment to overcome any obstacle. I pressed harder on the accelerator and drove toward whatever came next, leaving the past where it belonged, in the rearview mirror, growing smaller with every mile.